welcome everybody to 440 Gallery. We have two wonderful shows. Right now we have Karen Gibbons' show, Allusion, and Delusion, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And also Lost and Found in the project space with four artists, Jon Bunge, Leigh Blanchard, Juliet Martin, and Michele Brown. So, and I know them all, so I'm worried about getting my names right is beyond me. We'll start with Karen. And Karen, this is such a beautiful show. Congratulations. This is your 8th solo show here at 440 Gallery, and it is as alive and vibrant as ever, and perhaps the best show that we've ever had here. So
thank you.
Yeah. But first, I really do have to ask about the title, because I know you struggled with that. Allusion, and Delusion. Can you just share some of your thoughts about how you developed that title?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, when you asked me how many shows I had, I was trying to think of all the titles, and I realized that the titles are really relevant in the moment. You know, the work kind of obviously stays the same, but you know, you look at it kind of differently from different points in time. So the title is important right now, but later it's going to be less so. But so I was thinking, like, what's something that ties this work together and that kind of characterizes how I think about my work. And I think of like all the elements of it as allusions, like alluding to something, not specifically and not necessarily my thing that I'm alluding to might be different than what you might think I'm alluding to when you see it, and that's okay with me because I think everything has multiple points of view. And so I thought, allusion, that's perfect. And then, you know, while I'm pondering it, I'm like, but wait a minute, what about the illusion and delusions? And then I thought, I'll call it illusion, delusion. And then I'm like, wait, no, that's too much of a tongue twister. So I settled on illusion, illusion, and delusion. So yeah, I kind of leave it to the viewer to think about which things are illusions, which are delusions, and which are illusions.
It's a big responsibility. Your work is so rich in materials and significance that I hardly know where to begin. You do so much layering, actual layering, metaphorical layering, and it's a big part of your process, as is the use of found materials. Can you talk a bit about your process, and particularly as it unfolded into these works?
Yes, so I've been, a while now, I've transitioned to using collage, and it's almost like, and I think I'm going to be talking a little more about like becoming back to a painter, 2D person from making 3D work. But it's almost like the thing that starts it finds me. So I have this huge box of printed material, and also I take everything, all the images that I use are either my own photos that I take, or something that struck me that I just think I have to keep, or also family photos, like, and there was a long period where I almost always used the family photos, and now they're still popping up again, but they're all in the mix in this big box. And so, and it's the same thing with the found elements. So, like I found this board, and it sat in my studio. Well, I found it in our wonderful studio building. Someone said they were getting rid of it, and I said, I'll take it, even though it was, you know, it had like things screwed to it. You could see it has holes in it. The pink around the edge was there. There was a big swath of red in it. But I knew that, like, this was a find for me, but I didn't know what it was gonna, how it was gonna unfold. And so it's always a combination of like, I have an idea of what I might want it to look like, and then the elements sort of decided as it goes along. So it starts off with like an armature of images, and so I'm choosing the images because they have certain illusions for me, and then I then start to add some color, texture, the layers, and sometimes the images completely go away. Sometimes they go away enough that, you know, I kind of know they're there, but they're not part of the composition really anymore. So it's additive and reductive. So sometimes, you know, I love using the pastel because I can make that go away, and then it can come back, and then it can become permanent. So so it's a matter of layering, and then sometimes the final layer is oil, because once it's oil, I can't go back. And so I'm always like really hesitant to go to the final layer of oil. So this is the only one that has oil now, and that's it's got oil stick, and it's got oil with wax medium. So it's kind of a patina, and I love that kind of patina, but I also like hold back from it because it means that I can't keep messing around with it.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that piece because I mean, a lot of people know this, but you know, in the interest of full disclosure, Karen and I shared a studio for 20 years, so I'm pretty familiar with some aspects of her work. The natural world, and especially animals, are woven through all of your work. And the snake has been a recurring theme over the years. Is it just a coincidence that we are in the year of the snake, just as your show opens? Yes, the wood snake. And can you tell us about the significance of certain animals or images in your work?
It is coincidence, because this was finished at the end of 24, and then when I decided to have it in the show, I learned that it was the year of the snake. I'm like, okay, perfect. And then, and so I'm interested in, you know, the spiritual aspects of these things. I'm interested in the idea that nature is everything, and you can't really separate humans from nature, but we've done our best to do that, haven't we? And the consequences of it are what we're living in now, from my point of view. So I'm always sort of grappling with this idea of like loving nature, and what does that mean, you know? And then it becomes something more spiritual to me, and the animals help to evoke all those qualities that animals have, because they haven't separated themselves from nature. So like this piece is called Guidance, because I think of the owl as that kind of silent guide. They're meant, you know, we associate them with being wise. They're also predators, and they're also like, you know, near the top of their food chain. So each animal has an array of things you can associate it with. So the snake I think of as transformation, and but we also associate the snake with something scary and possibly poisonous, and so like, is that part of transformation? Maybe, I don't know. But because they shed their skin and move on, they symbolize transformation, but they also teach us about being grounded and moving close to the earth. So, you know, all those things. And that's, I feel like my work is successful when it can hold those things kind of lightly. And, you know, you can keep coming back to it and say, oh, but what about this? well, what about this? What about this?
Yes. Very layered, definitely. Well, you began as a painter and then became a sculptor, and I'd say in recent years you've moved between the two with seeming ease. And what's the relationship of your sculpture to the way you construct your two-dimensional mixed media pieces, and what draws you to one or the other at any given moment?
So yeah, my sculpture was always about something found, and that found thing would be the armature for actually creating kind of a painting, because I was originally a painter and loved just that tactile action of applying paint and seeing what I can do with it. And so I would cover the armature with nylon so that you could still see some of the shape of it, but then it would become something that I was creating. So it's still a little bit like that. So I love to have the inspiration of something that's already there to work with, and now it's also the images can be the armature. But it's even more compelling to me if I have a found, or even just the surface that it's on becomes an object. So then it's going back and forth between the illusion that painters create and the reality of this is an object. And so am I dealing with this as an object, or am I looking at it as something that is an illusion of space? And so I would probably still be making sculpture if, you know, I had some wealthy patrons and
Well,
giant studio space.
I would just interject that the world of found objects on the street in New York
It's changed.
really
It has changed.
I mean, back in the day in Gowanus, there was no end to what you could find on the street.
But let me mention,
It's cleaned up.
yes, but these sculptures in the window, the bricks are bricks from, thank you, Jamie, from buildings in Gowanus that are no more, and gifted to me, and they've been waiting to have a new life, and since the show is coming up, I'm like, oh, this is time for the bricks to have their identity. So they've emerged as, you know, again, all those different things, like a little bit memorial, a little bit nostalgia, and also what's going on with nature and how we nurture it. So, does that answer the question?
Yes, yes. But what's percolating? What's coming next?
So, I've been doing, and now I have to thank someone else, so Jocelyn. Jocelyn was kind enough to give me this paper, this deckled edge paper, and I said, you know, I don't usually do that much work on paper, mainly because I've struggled that it's not enough of an object. And somehow this paper is enough of an object that I could create these, I almost think of them as sketches, or Dale Williams called them poems, and I like that a lot. So again, these are collage elements, and most of them are kind of leftover pieces. So I'll keep even the leftovers if they have a nice shape to them, or if, you know, there's enough of the image that it still calls to me. So I can go through these and tell you, you know, what each of the pieces is from. And that's not important, but it, you know, in a way, like all history is important, right? And so these have kind of pointed me in a different direction, thinking about how things can be lighter, things can have more space and less time, maybe. So, so there's that, and I also found, because if I find something, it's very important. Many, many squares. And so you see I've been doing some things with diptychs and triptychs and some even more components with the implication anyway. You don't have to change them in different order, but they can be in different order. And sometimes I hang them in a different order than they were created in. And so I have many, many squares, so I'm thinking of going bigger with that. So I'm trying to kind of combine this lighter approach and maybe more multiples. So we'll see.
Yes, there's always something new, which is what's so exciting. So there will be time after all the artists have spoken that you are welcome to ask them questions, but just to sort of keep things flowing, I thought we'd go down, and it's so convenient because you guys arranged yourself that my papers were in, so I really appreciate that. Jon, congratulations. This is your first show as a member of 440 Gallery. And we're thrilled to finally have you as part of our artist group. We have been nagging at Jon, pulling on his shirt sleeves, asking him to join the gallery, and now he's here. So you have 3 very beautiful sculptures in this project space show, Lost and Found. How does the title manifest in your work?
First of all, let me thank the gallery for accepting me into the membership here. I've been coming here for years, and I think it's a wonderful space. It's intimate, and yet, has some size, and I like the fact that one artist gets a solo show here, then several get a group show in the back, so there's always variety, and it's, it's not too much art, so you can really focus on the art. So, so thanks to all the members for accepting me in. And I'm honored to be a member. And so the theme in the back is Lost and Found. And the way I interpret that is that I do think in this high-tech age, when we're on our screens a lot, and I'm guilty of it, a lot of compelling stuff to, whether it's the New York Times or Instagram or email or texting or, cat videos, dog videos, any animal video, okay? You've probably seen that. Jocelyn looks like these two, and she's like, Jon, I always see your name like that. You've liked it down. So anyway, so we're on our screens a lot, and I think sometimes we have lost and we're living in New York City. We've lost our connection to nature. Speaking of nature, and I mean not entirely, but I've got a lot of plants in my apartment. They keep me connected, but we're not. I'm not walking on grass every day. I'm not walking on dirt. I'm on concrete. I'm in the subway. So for me to work with the branches is like reconnecting me. I'm finding nature again, and that to me is, we're all heartbroken about what's happening to the planet, and microplastics to pollution to our oceans. I don't need to go down the list. You all know it, but to work with these branches connects me back to creation, right? I've got them literally in my hands. I'm feeling them, and so that's how the title, I interpreted the title.
Well, that leads me beautifully into the next question, which is one of the first things that people often ask about is your technique. And there are so many questions. Where do you find the branches? How do you build the sculptures? Do you change the color, the surface? How do shadows play into your work? Just speak a little bit about this.
Let's see, I can't remember all of that.
No, I heard you speak, and then some of us who are in the same studio building came, and you just spoke you answered a lot of those questions, and just where do you find the branches? Are they from here? How much do you change the branches? Do you work with what's there? Just kind of that basics.
Sure. I was joking about it. But sometimes I've noticed in an interview, the interviewer asks like 3 questions, and the person gets into one, and they're like, But anyway, the branches, where do they come from? I originally gathered some of them from the street when a branch was down after a storm. That's where I originally kind of got my first idea to work with branches. I was working with wood scraps from like a wood shop, and then I saw a branch on the street. I'm like, that's really gorgeous, right? That's beautiful. The wood scraps are quite beautiful too, right? Like layers of plywood and stuff. So then, my mother's yard provided a lot of good branches. Friends have sent me some branches, and I do, then there were some branches I couldn't get locally, so you can buy, florists do buy branches on the internet, and I feel a little badly in a way, but I haven't gone to Prospect Park and gathered every branch myself, but to be very honest, it's nice when 100 branches arrive in a bunch.
And you know what, somebody might have something to say if they saw you going around just snipping some of the nice branches in Prospect.
Oh, I wouldn't ever snip, I have to go on record, I would never snip a live branch unless someone's, Catherine Orrick right here is a member of the gallery, is a master gardener. She is already, I'm about to go get some branches from her. She's already clipped them because she was pruning. But I would never go get a branch without permission, right?
And just, John took, this 2 years in a row has taken my Christmas tree down.
Yes. So we've had a nice chat while I'm trimming it, snipping away. So I will get branches wherever the nice one advantage to ordering them online is that you can get some that are not local to here. So, so the curly willow that's on that hanging sculpture comes from a nursery in Wisconsin, and it's really gorgeous. I've sourced curly willow in a number of places. There's a florist in Manhattan who gets stuff from various places. His curly willow wasn't quite as nice as this one, so I go kind of lots of different places. Yeah.
Well, and the only other thing I want to ask is, people often wonder, do you paint them? Do you change them? I mean, you do scrape bark off, and you.
Correct. It depends on the branch, but a lot of times, like if I want a nice curve like this, and there's subsidiary branches growing off that are really very delicate and will probably break, I'll snip those off. But then I'm left with a white area. The inside of most branches is white, so then I've got I sand that down, paint that, try to match. By the way, the colors of the branches are incredibly complex, right? You go to the art store, you got various colors. These are so, if you look at a tree, let's see, we can, like that, look at that tree up there, and you'll see, well, it's gray, but then you'll try to mix that gray, and you're like, no, that's not right. Try to add a little green, a little brown, no, that's, it's really quite difficult to match. So, but I do work to try to, because I want that white spot to go away. So I do add some paint to cover those spots, and then they all get varnished at the end.
Okay, see, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay, you have 3 sculptures in this show, and it's something I hadn't thought about before. But one is on a base, one is hanging, and one is on the wall. Do you have an intention of placement when you are building a sculpture, or can each one be mounted or hung? Great
question. The ones that are kind of spherical can usually sit on a pedestal or be hung. A circular, imagine a sphere on this wall, it's a little hard to hang it. So that one that's on the wall has a kind of a flat back to it.
Right.
So that's really intended to be on the wall, or that could be on a pedestal as well. Yes. And I love that about sculpture. It's versatile. It could be on a pedestal, it could hang. But some of them can do all 3. Some seem to be better in one way, but I must say I am attracted to the hanging sculptures because they're pretty light and they will move with air currents. And in this in this show I've got a little fan to increase the movement, but then they'll move and it'll become a dynamic experience, like an experience that unfolds over time, because the sculptures will start, they will change directions, they'll slow down, they'll speed up, depending on if that door opens and the air current goes back there, it might speed up the sculpture. So, but they can do different things, and often it's up to the, when someone buys one, how they want it in their apartment. Do they want to hang it, which is a little more work, you got to get up to the ceiling and create the hook, or do they want it on the wall, or do they want it on, I find in New York City, not a lot of people have a lot of space, a horizontal space for a resting sculpture. So, but it's really up to the owner if it's purchased.
Well, it's something that I've seen your work. I've seen your work in your studio where there's a lot of it is hanging. But it was here that it occurred to me, these really can be shown or experienced in many different ways. And I think that's great. So we're looking forward to seeing more as the time goes by.
Thank you.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you. Leigh Blanchard. Hi. These new collages are so different from the work that you've shown previously. Your photographic work is done digitally, and regardless of the images, the surface is always very smooth, very elegant. And these pieces are notable for their texture and their roughness, and they're just a completely different direction. Can you tell us a little about the shift?
Yeah. So I would say part of the shift actually happened with working with actually two of the artists here, Gail and Juliet. We had a collaboration, three of us working on some art together, and it really got me out of my comfort zone, working with someone else's process and kind of keeping it alive and going, but adding my own to it. Got me, I think, to kind of understand and also just push my own personal boundaries more. And so that kind of got me thinking, that kind of got the wheels turning first. And then a recent trip to Japan had me surrounded by all these great textures, papers, and materials that I just wanted to take all of and come home with. And I think it was a big part was the combination of just my mind kind of being in that place of, you know, thinking about these new ideas and working with more texture and with more collage, like Gail works with collage. So, and then having just these new materials to work with, I was like, okay, let's try something new.
Yeah, but very new.
Yes.
And you also used, did you use only pens or also some other kinds of adhesive?
Yeah, so with the piece that you'll see that's in the frame, it's actually all attached together just with T-pins. And then with the other two pieces, it's glue and then just things being printed on top of one another as well. Sort of layers.
And did some of the, are some of your photographic images in these collages?
Yeah, so in Japan as well, I took a film camera and just took a lot of photographs. So they all have elements of photography, which is more what, you know, that's the element of my work that kind of has transferred over. Is like, I work in photography and digital or film, but that's the part that's kind of stayed the same.
You mentioned in your statement that this new work came about through a long period of self-exploration and reflection, and that culminated in a diagnosis of ASD. And it feels very brave to me to reveal so much personally and in the work. So how did this relate to the title of the show, Lost and Found?
Yeah, I feel like first in terms of, you know, having it be part of my statement and, you know, this, you know, the collaboration with Gail and Juliet and then the trip, I was working on these things and it just so happened that this discovery kind of happened at the same moment. And it only kind of felt fitting in that, you know, it's ASD is a neurological developmental disorder, so it's a lot of the way that I've learned that I process information and communicate information, and to me it felt just so, it's gonna be so different to think about my work now, because that's what my work is. It's processing my own thoughts and communicating it to people visually, and it's like, okay, this is happening a lot differently than I thought, right? And in terms of the title, Lost and Found, this process for me has been just all about kind of the sense of I'm not actually losing parts of myself, but it feels kind of like that at times. And then finding new parts of myself or rediscovering what parts of me really mean. And so yeah, Lost and Found, that's kind of how that relates for me.
It's a powerful title, I think, for everybody in the group, so in different ways. So that's why I kind of bring it up each time. And how do you see this more tactile experience manifesting in your work going forward? Have you thought about ways to bring the old and the new together?
Yeah, I've considered that is something that will happen, and unsure how to navigate it. It has felt like a lot of these new ideas brewing and this new way of approaching my own work, it felt right to do it in a process of creating that I've never done before, because the whole thing's new. So it's kind of like, let's start. But now it comes the harder part of reapproaching how I've always done things and kind of reanalyzing that. And I honestly have no clue what that'll look like, but I'm excited for the challenge of it.
Well, I'm excited too, because your work is always fascinating, and I'm interested in seeing how you bring those together, because I mean, it's not like the work that you were doing before wasn't fantastic, and so great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, and now Juliet Martin, as always, beautiful and intriguing work. So once again, we have Lost and Found, and you're showing a piece from 25 years ago, as well as recent work. And can you tell us about their connection?
So, 25 years ago, I was 5 years old. All right, no, not really. I was actually a graduate student getting a degree in digital media. So weaving wasn't around. I was using the computer. I was making web-based art pieces. That was really what I was really interested in, and I liked the idea of taking the computer and bringing that together with hand-done things to sort of create a merger where it looks like it's done by hand, but it's sort of off, and it's not done by a computer, but it is done by a computer. And then sometime 25 years later, and I'd stopped doing that for a while, was actually a ceramicist for a long time. And then recently, in the past 2 years or so, I started creating images that same way of like doing some drawing and scanning it and doing some watercolor and scanning it and putting it all together. And when the name Lost and Found came up, it was perfect, because it was like, it's something that I did 25 years ago, and now I found it again. And so the process is incredibly similar, and it sort of shocked me that I didn't catch on to that myself. But for me, that was sort of the lost art and finding it again.
I think the key sometimes is not figuring it out
Right.
yourself.
Right.
Because if you figured it out, then you become self-conscious, right? But I think that's great. Well, I'm really intrigued by your use of such disparate methods and mediums. So you very high-tech, where you work with a computer and you do things that I have no idea how you do, and then you combine them in the other pieces that are on view here with hand weaving, which is a process as old as time. It's slow, it's intricate, and they're so different, and yet there they are in the same piece. So how does that combination have a particular meaning for you?
I would say what's important to me when I'm either weaving or drawing or using the computer, I sort of like to take it out of its package so it isn't recognized right away as being a drawing or being a woven piece. People will see some of the things and be like, oh, that's some nice fabric, and you happen to weave it. Or, oh, that's a nice drawing.
You happen to weave it. I'm just saying, I mean, how many of us have accidentally?
All right, so I hand out the yarn and I spin the yarn. All right. So there's a little more to it than that.
There's sheep out in the
Yeah, out on our deck. It's really nice. Our cat is an Angora. So, but I want there to be a little bit of unease when you see it, where you can't quite place it as a digital image, and you can't quite place it like the kind of weaving I do doesn't follow patterns or counting. It's very free form, and because of that, it has a different sort of temperature as compared to something more like a hound's tooth. You know, the things I'm doing, you can throw anything in there, and then I will also like submerge it in matte medium to give it like a little bit of a little bit of another dimension within them. So it's sort of like, how can I take all these, like weaving is made on a loom, so how can I weave something that doesn't look like it was woven? Or like, how can I make this drawing look so you're not sure how it got there? So I actually use monoprints to remove it one step more, and then scan the monoprints and bring them together with drawings. So it's really trying to sort of take something that's a tool and use it for something else.
Okay. Fascinating and challenging. And a final question. There are 2 rabbits here in the show, and you've been working with rabbits for several years now. Can we expect to see rabbits in your upcoming solo show? You have the show right after Joanne, and Joanne and I will be announcing that at the end.
Well, my first rabbit was drawn on September 23rd, 2023. And I've been drawing every day rabbits. I've got stacks of journals with rabbits. And rabbits have come up in other places. They were in an installation I did at the Jefferson Market Library with these paper rabbits. During the Gowanus art crawl, I had rabbit monoprints. These were some of the pieces that were made at that time, but as it developed, I realized that my relationship with the rabbits really has to do with fear, and fear of knowing yourself. And that's what's sort of being addressed in the show that will be here later. This idea that, you know, the rabbit, you think of fear, but then sort of like when you see yourself, is that something you're going to be afraid of when you recognize yourself in that place? So there'll be lots of rabbits.
Thank you. Yes, we're looking forward to it. And finally, last but not least, Amanda, once again, we see your beautiful watercolors. And you have here either a very large piece or a lot of smaller pieces. And they have, and this is part of an even larger piece, right? That has particular meaning for you. Can you share a bit about that?
Yeah, so I do think of it as both. They are individual pieces, but also part of a whole. So right now there are 25 pieces out there. It used to be 30. It was originally a part of a project that was on view at VAR Gallery in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And the challenge that all the artists in that show were put to was to, for last year, for January, to create one piece every single day. And it had to be like within 6 by 6, so that's like the kind of like strict dimensions, and in the end viewed as a grid like that. I took that as an opportunity to kind of treat it as a visual journal. So at the time, I was about 6 months postpartum. So each of these are, there's a little, first time I've ever used writing in my work. There's a little bit of writing as well as my like typical approach to like experiential watercolor art making. But each one represents like that experience for the day. In that show, about 5 of them sold, so now we're down to 25. And I played around with the idea of like, well, now they're just like a bunch of disparate pieces. The whole is gone. But you will know this as somebody who works with birth people a lot. Your brain has an amazing capacity to forget a lot of things during the postpartum period. And I thought that was surprisingly fitting that like these days, these like moments were kind of like plucked away and like disappeared out into the world. And so no matter how many times one piece might go on a separate journey, I think the whole of that like experience of making this, as well as those the collective experience of motherhood at that time kind of remains.
Well, that's kind of, yes, I didn't, that's interesting. I didn't know that the other 5 were not there because they had disappeared.
Who knows where they are?
But this seems to fall right into the title of the show, Lost in Found. I mean, you've spoken a little bit already, but can you talk a bit about how motherhood has affected your art practice? She says, about to burst into hilarious laughter. I mean, the fact that you're still making art, a miracle.
And that was part of why I like originally like applied for this challenge. I think it was like month 3. I was like just coming off of my maternity leave, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna apply for this thing. She'll be like 6 months old by then. I'll have the free time, you know, to be able to do a piece a day. And yeah,
she'll be at work.
I'll just hand her some crayons.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it almost killed me, but but it was a really great creative exercise in making sure that I like got into my studio every day, even if it was just to like make one mark. I knew that I had to do it for this specific project, and I definitely recommend that if you ever have a baby. But yeah, the whole going to the theme of Lost and Found, in addition to like lost memories, there's also anybody who's had a child you experience a certain loss of self, at least for a little bit. Like your self becomes wrapped around keeping another being alive, and on the like hierarchy of needs, art making doesn't always necessarily come around the same time as like, you know, eating or taking a shower. The little things, you know. But still, I think art in general is something so intricate and like intrinsic to our lives, and especially if you consider yourself an artist, you don't necessarily want to lose that piece of yourself, and that is always the fear, I think, for any person who has a child and considers themselves a creative person, that they don't want to lose that part of themselves. So I do think there are parts that have lost. There's like a shift. I feel like I create a little bit more efficiently than I did in the past, where I used to kind of, I don't know, felt like prancing through daisies, but now it's like, let's get in there, let's get some marks on, and like, I think there's the foundness there too, is the creativity that comes from that that lack of time too. Like if you are working within boundaries, you always have to be a little bit more creative within them. And now, a year from this, Zuzu can hold crayons and does, and seeing her choices that she makes when she's like scribbling, I was like, oh, interesting.
Well, that leads me to another question, which is, when I heard you speak in Berlin about your layering of color, it's a very specific process with particular meaning to you. And can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I can imagine that in this particular project, it was especially meaningful.
Yes. So anybody who's ever worked in watercolors knows that it's wet. Well, I'm saying. And to be able to put color on top of color and to be able to get kind of that like transparent effect, you need to wait for it to dry, which I find for a lot of people is not something they like to do. They just want to like get in there and keep painting, but watercolor kind of requires you to like put a layer down, step away, put another layer down. Like you always kind of have to reapproach the work each time. And for my work, which deals a lot with memory and creating narratives around self, that requires you to like reapproach, like all of these are like specific moments in a day. It requires me to come back to that moment each time I come back to the page and look at it in a different way, perhaps. Like when I like first put it down, it might be like a really tough memory, but like by the third layer, it's already started to shift. So each color, each layer is a response to the layer below it, but also a response to your changing view of the whole experience.
Thank you, that's wonderful. And I could give a TED talk on new motherhood. I just want to say, nothing is lost.
Yes.
Nothing is ever lost.
Except for those memories.
Even they are not lost. They are someplace. And Karen and I go back to small children. And Karen had this parents group for artists, and we'd meet every 5 or 6 weeks, and you just had to bring something, you and me, something. And the reason that it had to be parents, she said, I cannot listen to somebody tell me they spent 8 hours in their studio. Nothing done. So now that we can spend that time and get nothing done, it feels good. But in that moment,
Yeah, I remember before babies, I said, oh, I only have an hour, I'm not gonna go to my studio. And after, I was like, I have an hour.
right, exactly, your sense of time changes completely. So I have announcements about upcoming shows, but I'd rather open things up. I'm sure that you have questions for these artists. There's so much work here, and there's so much that you have so beautifully opened up for us. So does anybody have any questions?
I have like a group of things I wanted to say. Is that okay?
That is okay.
All right. Well, first thing that I just realized is that Karen and Amanda, it's really interesting hearing about how layering comes into your work and how what's below it is like what happens first. The next layer is a reaction of that, and it feels very much like you both work. You both work with that, like that. You never know where it's going to go. Like you were mentioning that, and the work sort of tells you what it's going to be. So I just thought that was really interesting. And then I had a question for Jon. I was gallery sitting here the other day, and so I got a chance to look at your work very closely. Your craftsmanship is really quite amazing, and I'm wondering if that's been something like, did it take a long time to get to that point? Was that something that was, was that something that you started with and you that was essential to initially? So just wondering about that.
Thanks for the question. It really has gotten better, I think. Over time you talk to other artists, you discover new tools.
Mm-hmm.
I started using a Dremel tool, so everybody knows what it is. It's got a spinning thing, so I can make the groove that the next branch fits in more precise.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I used to just use this file, so all the grooves had to go like all the way through the next branch, but now I can create a little notch in there. The Dremel can go down like this. And then some woodworking person was telling me about a sanding stick. Like I didn't know you could get little sticks with these little standing thin, so you can get into tiny areas. So it's definitely been an evolution, and love talking to other woodworkers. So thank you for noticing the craft. I tried it. I aim for a very high level of craft, and but I think it's has grown. Yes.
Yeah, it reflects in the work. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
And then I'm sorry, I have one more.
No.
For Leigh. So I love the fact that a lot of the pieces are connected with those T-pins. And it's funny, but like what strikes me is that that's sort of taking things apart and putting them together. Just that physical thing of, of connecting them that way. And I don't know, I thought it was a really beautiful metaphor within the work,
Thank you.
So anyway, I'll
No, that's fine. Does anyone
Can I
else
just
have-
say, just
You
really
can ask a
quickly,
question.
actually this is just an observation, part of the experience here as a member is you have to gallery sit. And it's really great to just be in here. It's like, you never go to a museum and just say, okay, I've got 3 hours now, I'm just gonna sit here. And you sit around and you start really looking. It's really wonderful. So I just had to, throw that in.
And I'll just put a little bit, if you have not heard of All the Beauty in the World, the book by Patrick Bringley, who was a guard at the Metropolitan. And it is one of the most beautiful books. It's just extraordinary. And you'll never see those guards the same way again. It's just a fascinating book. But you spend, an hour or 2 or 3 looking at one painting. and in the gallery, so, anyway.
Slow, oh yeah. We used to, we haven't done it as a gallery in a while, but there's something called Slow Art Day. I don't know if that still exists.
Yeah.
It does.
Oh, it does, and we participated in that for a number of years, where people would come in and you'd have to look at one work of art for 5 minutes. 5 minutes is a very long time, you know, to look at one piece. And then we would go out to lunch and talk about them. It's a really nice experience.
I could make lunch.
It was really interesting to see how process kind of wove this whole talk together, that everybody, you know, through the various means, gave meaning to the individual work. So I thought that was really, really a nice thing, because they're all very distinct practices. And then I wanted to say about Karen's piece here, I find this piece to be so powerful and interesting. And do you use, I know you use animals quite frequently, but so having the figure of a human being so dominant in the center, is there something particular about that figure? I mean, I find intriguing because there's sort of like a hulkingness quality to him, which makes it seem maybe a little fearful, makes you feel a little fearful, but at the same time, there's, yes, and then you see his innards, which, you know, so then there's that vulnerability too. I mean, I'm
Yes.
don't know if I'm,
Well, and
if that's my reading into it, or.
and if you spend a little more time with it, you see, like, he's on tiptoe. He's very unstable. And, yes, so I like your observations. Thank you. And I think all my work, I'm interested when it has that contradiction. And I have done quite a bit of things with figures, but they're often like less obvious. And
Yeah, he's so front and center.
yeah, and
And a
so
little
it even like kind of
confrontational.
startled me
Yeah.
when I made it. I'm like, oh, I had to turn it around for a
Yeah.
while. I mean, 'cause it takes up a lot of space.
Yeah.
And almost to the point that I felt like it wasn't gonna work with other things. You know, it seemed like you know, kind of an anomaly with. But then it's funny. This is sort of part of that process thing you're talking about. Once it's hung here, now this is like it couldn't be any other configuration. Like, and how can that be when before I couldn't decide what to hang, and I was switching things around in, you know, my mind before the final thing came, and now, like, of course, this is exactly what I intended all along.
Anyone else with a question? Yes, Justin.
Just a couple things. First of all, Karen, it's been such a treat to watch all of this stuff emerge. Like, every time I go into the studio, I always look first to see what's new and what has changed and all the different things that come together. And I'm so glad that you have found a use for the paper that wasn't working for me. It's great to see it have another life. And then on the other end of the group here, Amanda, I was really struck by you talking about this grid, which was meant to be a 30-day process, but some of the pieces are missing. And I'm wondering if you've thought of ever hanging it as a grid with the ones that are missing, like there being an empty space there for that.
did consider that. I thought our install committee would kill me.
Here in this intimate space.
They were all somewhere else. Do whatever you want. But yeah,
Just because that idea,
Yeah.
and especially in the context of the lost and found and those missing memories.
yeah, I definitely like the idea of having it feel a little bit more like stuff has been pulled away, but yeah, I chose a little bit of ease for this time around.
Let's just shout out, yes.
First of all, I just want to say congratulations to all of you. I think they're two just wonderful shows. And I've had my shift here on Friday, and I did spend a lot of time looking at things. One thing I noticed about your work, Karen, is it really makes you really take a really close look. And each time you look at a piece, you find something new. I also think in this piece, I mean, I know I've seen your work over about 10 years now, or maybe more, but I always recognize that there's animals and people, humans in some of your work. But the way that they're configured, like the piece in the window here, because I'm sitting here and that's what I've been looking at while the talk has been going on, is even the way that the arrangement of the arms create another whole dimension. I mean, I see them almost as wounds. I see them as, you know, there's just so much to see, and it pulls you in, and it really, I feel like those arms are wrapped around. I mean, you know, it's just very emotional in a way. I also see the show as having a lot to see in the pieces here, and then when I look at the ones here on paper, I feel like they're calm, and they have a different feel to me. I think the show is cohesive, don't get me wrong, but there's something that's very soft and calm. And if you know me, I need calm. But and I actually purchased the piece for that reason, that it just really pulled me in, and I felt like I was part of this sky, this world of peacefulness, which I really feel like we all need that right now. So I just want to say congratulations. It's a strong show. And as for my fellow members back here, it's really a beautiful show. Leigh, I wanted to talk to you because when I saw that what you were putting in the show, it was so different to me. But the more I look at it, it's not so different. It's just sort of an evolution, you know, something that continues, and we change as time goes by. We change, and I think that's what our work is about too. Jon, what can I say? If you come in and this piece is missing, it's because I cut it down. And I love the shadow things. You know, I live in this apartment and I don't have any blinds on my windows because there's nobody can see in because I'm behind Greenwood Cemetery. But well, I guess they could see. But there's this wonderful thing that happens at sunrise. The trees from Greenwood and the trees on my terrace create this shadow on my wall, and it's like looking at a piece of artwork, you know, made in heaven, from heaven. So I kind of feel that with your shadows. I like that. And I know I'm talking a lot, but I love the texture in that and in the work here. And then of course Juliet does. I'm a fan of her work. But if you could go to her studio and see her setup, she's just the most organized person. But her work, the way she combines things and the color and the sensitivity, and I'm so glad that the piece I purchased, I find out, is 25 years old. So, that's great. And Amanda, what I want to say to you is that I also have a piece of yours, and the color, the palette seems so different here. And I wonder if that had anything to do with the joy of these are much more brighter pieces. I just wondering about the color, and I love the grid. Okay, that's it.
Yeah, I mean, some of it I think is joy, but I think there's also just a little bit of, in that moment, there's like a heightened sense of everything. Like, I remember at the time, like feeling like I could be like 3 rooms away and I could hear my daughter like, like everything's a little bit heightened, and so I felt like the color needed to be heightened too. Like the brightness can feel like joy, but sometimes it also can feel like warning bells or like flashing lights, depending on the day. Different moods.
Emotionally labile, I believe, is definitely.
There's just one last thing I'd like to say is that I feel like not just the people who are showing here, but those of you who are looking at it and people who are creating in other ways, that this is, to me, what's keeping us going, to be able to come into these spaces and to share and to see beautiful things, whether there's hidden meanings that are sadder or harder, but when you come together and you see it, and it's like the best 2 hours you can spend. Okay, so that's, thank you.
I have one other question. I'm not in a lack of questions today. For Juliet. So, one of the things that, it's funny, I haven't done that recently, like in recent years, but there have been times where I love combining materials that I wouldn't necessarily think would go together. And you do it very seamlessly, like it just feels like each, different thing that you have in grows into the other. Was there any point where you had a struggle with integrating different materials?
Yes. It took me a long time to get to a place where I could combine drawing and painting and weaving and digital, and how am I going to put them all together in a way that feels natural. Like that was really, I didn't want it to be a digital piece with a woven border.
Right.
And so trying to take these things and figure out that rabbit that I drew, like the one who's leaning forward, and seeing the weaving, those were not done for each other.
Interesting.
They were done separately, and then I looked at them together, and it looks as if I wove the piece to match, but it was really just sort of like how it happened. And with that, I would say, if I can look at something and look at something else and somehow bring them to a meeting point so that they look like they naturally came together, I'd say that's the trick.
That's a good trick.
Our next show, our upcoming show, is Joanne Acey, The Journey Home, and the opening reception for that will be Saturday, March 22nd, from 4 to 6 p.m. But before that, and in the project space, there'll be 3 artists, Catherine Orrick, who's here, Hongju Kim, who is not here at the moment, and me, Ellen Chuse. Abstraction by many means. So we're all abstract artists, and
You'll have to come to that.
you'll have to come and see. Right, exactly. Meanwhile, on the 16th of March, which is a Sunday, we have a musical program, me, myself, and I, from 4:40 to around 6 o'clock. After that, a closing party for this exhibition from 6 to 8, and we welcome you all here. Do we know who's performing?
Hilliard Green, he's a bassist.
A bassist, okay, very cool. Yeah, part of Connection Works. So please feel free to come for the music and come for the party, come for the art, and then Karen has something, I think, one more thing.
Yes. So on Friday evening, March 14th, you guys can help yourself to these. I'm going to be doing something I call Hearts on Our Sleeves, a paint your jacket workshop. So it's a way that we can come together, create intention for resistance. And if you want to put your slogan on your jacket, or if you just want to have an intention for the things that you want in the world, that's the idea. So I'm going to provide the materials, and all the proceeds are going to go to the ACLU.
Anyone else have anything to announce, or shall we look at art?
Yes, I
I'm
know.
sorry.
Coming up, that's okay.
Excuse me,
at
right,
Spoke
of
the
course.
Hub
Right.
on this coming Friday.
I remember.
Well, I've had a lot to remember.
7 to 9, so everybody's welcome. Come.
Spoke the Hub is on
Spoke the Hub,
Union
Union
Street.
Street between 6th and 5th.
Closer to 6th.
Yes,
Yes.
right.
Near
Yeah.
6,
Yeah.
yes.
What was the date again?
The 7th of March, next Friday. Yeah, so I sent out emails, and if you're on my email list, you probably got them. Instagram. Would love to see you.